Tatsuki Fujimoto is one of the most interesting authors alive. I could never imagine in 1,000 years that the same movie that straight up shows a man in lingerie, gives the audience a full ass view of one of the main characters, and has a plot as simple as boy liking girl, could turn out to be one of the most painfully beautiful movies I've genuinely ever seen. From someone who has read the Chainsaw Man manga, the translation from book to page is second to none. Which pisses me the fuck off. Okay, actually, hold that thought. I gotta play the intro. Alright, look, I'm gonna be upfront with you. This video is about why the Chainsaw Man movie genuinely erases the gap between anime movies and real movies and what makes it work just so goddamn well. If you want to see that, I've chaptered this video, so feel free to skip ahead. But right now, I have to get something fully off my chest. Tatsuki Fujimoto. What the fuck, man? How do you have the ability to make one of the most well-crafted stories I've ever seen written and then put so much damn goonage in it that it makes it borderline unwatchable? I actually dropped Chainsaw Man after watching it a certain way in, and there are even some parts of episodes that I haven't seen to this very day. I feel like a freak for recommending this show just because of how much Fujimoto loves to write amazing stories, amazing characters, and put his own fucking foot in his mouth and make it unwatchable. I am so glad my homeboy asked me if I wanted to go watch it with him, because I genuinely would have not gone to see it by myself. I told his ass before we went in that if I saw someone I know in that theater, I literally would have to commit suicide. I would never be able to step foot in public ever again. That is simply something you do not live down. I would rather get caught watching the Teletubbies than Chainsaw Man. Granted, the Gooner bait is not atrocious by any means, but because of how the anime is, I assumed that this movie even existing in the first place was just an elaborate cover-up to get me to out myself as a Chainsaw Man fan and have public humiliation ensue. Taking it a step further, the manga is so much worse. Chainsaw Man is one of the few animes that I've liked so much that I've read the manga, and oh my god, it is f***ing... I don't think authors should be allowed to write fiction without having studied the character depth of Chainsaw Man. That being said, it gets so much worse in the manga. To illustrate this point, I'm going to ask you one simple question. What's on her hand? The picture. Tell me exactly what is on her hand. Exactly what you are thinking right now is unfortunately the answer. Okay, let's end rant here. I just had to get that off my chest. But I will, however, say that this movie is a far cry from the anime and is genuinely beauty incarnate. So let's get into it. The first thing I want to get into is the animation. Half the reason why I went to go see the movie was simply because of how good the animation looked from the trailer. Now, I'm not an idiot that thinks good animation makes a good anime, but I don't think this movie would have been the same without the insane animation. Sukuna vs. Mahoraga is often said to be one of the best animated fights in anime. Saying that Bomb Devil vs. Chainsaw Devil is that on steroids is honestly doing it an injustice. The animation was so pristine that walking out of that theater, I felt genuine horror for those poor animators that had to work on it. It's clear that there wasn't only a lot of detail in animation, but a lot of effort in storyboarding out the fights. Sometimes fast scenes move slow, and sometimes slow scenes move fast, but it always gets the desired effect. What's so good about the animation from a narrative perspective is that it doesn't just feel like moving pictures, it feels like genuine art. At some points in the movie, it really comes across like modern animes meeting the more whimsical feel of the older gen anime. It feels like each scene isn't just animated with the intent to draw, it feels like each scene is animated with the intent to characterize, which is 100% the way to go. Fujimoto does amazing character work, and the animators specifically chose that art direction to make it pop. One of the biggest hurdles an animated movie has to overcome is the fact that they have to perfectly illustrate human emotion. Obviously, actors in real life can do it like flipping on and off a switch, but for animated film to achieve the same effect, they have to put in infinitely more work. That's why it surprised me when not only did the movie perfectly capture the emotions, it exceeded a lot of others in the space. Whether that was just everyday life, love, or genuine horror, it manages to rip it out at the heart and slap it on the screen. Alright, sit down for this one because there is a decent amount to unpack here. I'll try my best to tap dance around it when I can, but as someone who has both read and watched this property, it's going to be a little bit difficult for me. I'll try my best not to, but official spoiler warning here. Okay, that out of the way, let's talk character depth. First thing to note here is that the adaptation of the source material is so great that I'm just going to be talking about the story here and not specifically the movie. Because they did such a good job with the adaptation, it really feels meaningless to make the distinction. The character arcs in this story are written so subtly, and what I mean by that is that it's hard to pick out exact moments where I felt the main characters have a change of heart or a new motivation. The way it all unfolded was so uniquely human that following it was both not a challenge but also hard to tell you exactly where everything lands. Of course, there were big moments where it was obvious that the given character had a change of heart, but in the moment it almost feels like it was always like that. The character arc sneaks up on you, and before you know it, the character has gone through a very subtle but impactful change. This is why Fujimoto excels at character writing because, as I'll say for the 100th time, the best stories don't use their characters to tell their world, they use their world to tell their characters. What I mean by this is simple. Chainsaw Man would be nowhere near as good if the plot was something like Demon Slayer and the Gun Devil was just a big bad that all of public safety has to work together to defeat. In my opinion, this is where Demon Slayer kind of falls flat for me. Not that it's a bad story in the slightest. If that were the case, I wouldn't have the complete series sitting on my shelf, but the criticism is still valid. As compelling as the start of Demon Slayer is, it has nothing on the start of Chainsaw Man simply because it ignores the rule. When demons kill Tanjiro's family, we can only sympathize, and when he gains his motivation to kill Muzan and starts learning breathing forms and killing demons, the story's already too far gone. Tanjiro's journey is now deadlocked in a constant loop of having the character tell the world. When big events happen in Demon Slayer, it's more likely we learn something about Demon Slayer rather than Tanjiro. Now compare that to Chainsaw Man. The story opens with a kid who is drowning in debt and having to sell organs to live and hunt down dangerous devils to make a living. But notice how the dangerous devils part isn't as striking as all those other things. Sure, we want to see what this world of devils has to offer, but really only as much as it relates to Denji. And when Denji is ultimately willing to give up his body so that his dog can live the life that he never could, we don't just sympathize, we empathize. I do want to reiterate though that just because a story is a lot of world building and a lot of visuals doesn't make it a bad story. Solo Leveling is one of my favorite series ever written, again complete series, but I would literally be the first one to tell you that there is genuinely no story. The problem is that there's always going to be another Demon Slayer, or there's always going to be another Solo Leveling, but the one that will be remembered is the one with the most interesting characters. The only way to make a piece of fiction memorable is to make characters that don't let you forget how they made you feel or what they made you think. And say what you will about Chainsaw Man, but it is ultimately really good at making something that is uniquely human. Okay, I told you I was gonna have a lot to say, but hopefully you learned something. And if you did learn something, subscribe. Just a suggestion. Anyways, back to the movie. What truly brings this movie together is just the amazing cinematography that went into this film. The soundtrack is phenomenal. Kensuke Ushio literally outdid himself with everything he worked on for this movie and this property in general. The soft moments were perfectly scored as well as the fast-paced loud moments. Overall, the soundtrack was amazing. The pacing of this movie is literal perfection. There was not a single point of this movie where I felt like things needed to pick up or slow down. Everything was on beat when it needed to be. This movie is hilarious. I watched the dub version in theaters, so I don't know about the sub, but at least for the dub, there was a part that literally had me dying laughing in the theater, which I have never done before. In general, it feels like every single inch of this movie works so well cohesively that if one part was missing, it just wouldn't feel right. Ultimately, the movie manages to capture every single moment of the manga and not only perfectly represent it, but use every single form of media at its disposal to make the story come to life. This video is disastrous glaze, but I genuinely can't help it. This was hands down one of the best movies, if not the best movie I've ever seen. Even as somebody who has previously read the manga, seeing it on screen still somehow hit even harder. Even knowing exactly what was going to happen didn't ruin the intrigue on this film. So, Chainsaw Man's Reize arc I couldn't recommend enough. The sheer quality of this film makes me think that we're at a point where anime movies can officially surpass the majority of their traditional film counterparts. I wouldn't normally choose watching an animated movie over a traditional one, but this one I just feel like there's genuinely no difference. It just manages to hit all those emotional, funny, and action-packed beats perfectly. I don't even credit the Demon Slayer movie with that achievement because although it was a great movie, the source material being adapted ultimately just doesn't have the same cinematic feel as Chainsaw Man. So, as far as I am concerned, the Chainsaw Man movie can literally only be described as a work of art, and if you haven't already watched it, you should get on that. So, that was my explanation of this peak fiction. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to like and subscribe because I love talking about any and everything anime story. I normally do have more announcements to make at the end of these videos, but I feel like I'm just gonna leave this one here. If you want to be featured like these lovely friends, leave a comment below on what you thought of the Chainsaw Man movie. It's honestly really nice to hear you guys' opinions on this because there are so many ways to view a story and I'm just one person. If anything, it's just nice to see you friends around. Wait, hold on. I really want this video to get to the 10-minute mark just because it's aesthetically pleasing. So I'm just gonna like wait out here for like a little bit longer. Okay, that should do it. Well, it looks like there's nothing left to be said. So with that, I bid you peace, my friend.